In the basement storage room of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, behind a locked door that most tour groups never see, there is a glass case holding the remains of a skeleton. The bones are yellowed and brittle. A few fragments of a gilded wooden coffin sit nearby, partially reconstructed. A small catalog card reads, KV55, Valley of the Kings. Discovery date, January 6th, 1907. Identity, unknown. Most people walk right past it. The guides don't slow down. The tourists don't stop. Because to the untrained eye, it looks like any other ancient burial. Another pharaoh, another mummy, another chapter in Egypt's endless archive of the dead. But hidden inside this skeleton is something that shouldn't exist. A contradiction. A scientific impossibility. A secret that Egypt's own government has never fully resolved and that the world's leading forensic DNA specialists cannot agree on, even today. This is not a myth, not a metaphor. This is Tomb KV55 and what was found inside it. What the bones say, what the DNA says, and what someone in ancient Egypt went to extraordinary lengths to destroy may mean that one of the most powerful pharaohs in history has been misidentified for over a century. And if that's true, it means our entire understanding of the royal bloodline that produced Tutankhamun is built on the wrong foundation. Before we go deeper, if you're new here, this channel covers ancient history through the lens of forensic science, archaeology, and genetics. If that's your kind of rabbit hole, hit subscribe right now. We go places the textbooks don't. Let's go back to the beginning. January 6, 1907. Valley of the Kings, Luxor, Egypt. A young excavator named Edward Ayrton, working for American millionaire Theodore Davis, notices something beneath the debris of a collapsed passageway. A sealed entrance. A doorway nobody had entered in over 3,000 years. 3 days later, on January 9th, Ayrton, Davis, and 2 other men break through. What they find inside stops them cold. A single burial chamber. Not lavish, not grand. In fact, it is oddly sparse for a royal tomb. And at the center of the chamber, lying in a badly deteriorated wooden coffin, is a skeleton. The coffin itself is extraordinary. It is coated in gold leaf. It was clearly made for royalty. But something is deeply wrong with it. The face, the golden death mask that would have identified the occupant, has been hacked off, ripped away, not fallen with time, deliberately torn free. And where the cartouche should be, the hieroglyphic oval containing the buried person's name, there is nothing. The stone has been gouged out, chiseled down, scratched until unreadable. Someone, more than 3,000 years ago, tried to erase this person from history, not just from the record. In ancient Egyptian belief, destroying a person's name was the most severe punishment imaginable. It did not just remove them from the record. It destroyed their soul. It meant they could never enter the afterlife. Whoever ordered this wanted to make sure the person inside that coffin was obliterated, not only in this life, but in every life to come. The question archaeologists have been fighting over ever since is simple. Who was worth that level of hatred? For most of the 20th century, the official position shifted repeatedly. Arthur Weigel, one of the first men inside the tomb, initially believed the skeleton was female, a queen. That theory collapsed almost immediately when it became clear the bones were male. Then came the next theory. This was Akhenaten himself, the heretic pharaoh, the man who dismantled Egypt's polytheistic religion, devoted the empire to a single sun deity called Aten, and built an entirely new capital city in the desert, Amarna, in just a few years. The man whose name the priests of Amun spent decades systematically erasing from every temple, every column, and every wall in Egypt after his death. The damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. It made sense. The Amarna objects in the tomb, the deliberate destruction, the erased name, all of it fit the profile of someone whose enemies wanted gone. For decades, scholars accepted it. KV55 was Akhenaten. Case closed. It was the most comprehensive DNA analysis ever conducted on the royal mummies of the New Kingdom. The team extracted and sequenced genetic material from 11 royal mummies, including the skeleton from KV55 and the famous boy king, Tutankhamun. The results were stunning. The DNA confirmed that the KV55 individual was Tutankhamun's biological father. Y chromosome, short, tandem repeat markers matched across 3 generations. Amenhotep III, KV55, Tutankhamun. The lineage was direct. The science, they said, was solid. Here's where it gets strange. Because at exactly the same moment, the DNA was saying this person was a middle-aged pharaoh who ruled Egypt for 17 years. The bones were saying something completely different. Multiple skeletal analyses conducted by different forensic teams using different methodologies had estimated the KV55 individual died somewhere between 19 and 25 years old. Some put the upper range at 35, but the lower range, supported by the fusion state of the epiphyses, the condition of the pubic symphysis, and the complete absence of any age-related bone degeneration, pointed clearly to a young man, a very young man. Akhenaten is believed to have ruled for at least 17 years. He was almost certainly not a child king. He would have been, at minimum, in his mid-30s when he died, possibly older. A man in his mid-30s does not have the skeletal profile of a 22-year-old. The coffin found in KV55 was not made for a king. It was originally crafted for a woman, a royal woman of the Amarna period. This is confirmed by the feminine grammatical forms embedded in its inscriptions, even after alterations were made to adapt it for a male burial. The coffin was modified, repurposed. Whoever placed this person in KV55 used a borrowed coffin. The mainstream explanation is that this was an emergency reburial, that when Amarna was abandoned after Akhenaten's death, his remains were hastily moved to the Valley of the Kings and placed in whatever was available. But that explanation has a problem. A reburial conducted in haste does not come with golden coffins, alabaster canopic jars, and a decorated magical shrine. That level of material is intentional. This was not a dump site. This was a deliberate burial, planned and executed with care. And then, at some point, someone came back in and systematically destroyed all the identifying features. The coffin was adapted, the name was removed, the face was taken, but the body remained. Why would you go to that trouble? Why destroy the identity but leave the remains? Unless the destruction was the point. Not to prevent the burial, but to prevent the identification. The second clue is the tomb's contents themselves. Among the objects recovered from KV55 were 4 canopic jars, the sealed vessels that held the organs of the deceased. These jars bore the face of a woman. Scholars identified that face as belonging to Queen Kia, a secondary wife of Akhenaten, and according to some interpretations, possibly the mother of Tutankhamun. But the inscriptions on those jars had been altered too. A name had been removed and another begun. The jars, like the coffin, had been redirected. Not similar to the treatment of the coffin. Not inspired by it. The same hands, the same method, the same ancient act of deliberate erasure applied to every identifying object in the room. The burial assemblage did not belong to one person. It belonged to several, and they had all been scraped clean. What are you looking at when you look at KV55? A tomb, yes, but also a palimpsest, a document written over, a history where someone has gone through with a knife and cut out every name, and what remains is the negative space of a person, a shape without a label, a royal without a crown. The third clue is the most unsettling. When the 2010 DNA team published their findings, they also released the Y chromosome haplogroup data for the royal male line. The results showed a pattern consistent across Amenhotep III, KV55, and Tutankhamun, forensic geneticists noted these markers. They noted them carefully. The identity of the KV55 haplogroup was never released publicly by the Egyptian authorities. The report was never completed. The researcher responsible for independent verification of the genetic data stopped speaking publicly on the subject. The Hawass team moved on to other projects, and the one question that the genetic data was supposed to finally answer, remained open. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it disappeared. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. But that doesn't make this discovery ordinary. The most grounded version of events is still remarkable. In the years immediately after Akhenaten's death, a rapid political and religious counter-revolution swept Egypt. The Amun priesthood reasserted control. Amarna was abandoned. Every trace of the new religion was systematically destroyed. And at some point in this chaos, possibly during the reign of Horemheb, the general turned pharaoh who finalized the erasure of the Amarna period, someone decided that even the dead needed to be punished. They went into the royal burials, they scratched out names, they destroyed faces, they dismantled divine identities, and they left behind a skeleton with no label, in a coffin that wasn't made for it, in a tomb that nobody sealed properly, but flooded and partially collapsed within a generation. Whether the bones belonged to Akhenaten or to his co-regent Smenkhkare, a figure so obscure that we have almost no independent record of his reign, the answer changes the map of ancient Egyptian history. If it is Smenkhkare, then Akhenaten's mummy is still out there, somewhere in the Valley of the Kings, in an unmarked shaft, in a corridor that hasn't been opened in 3,000 years, waiting. If it is Akhenaten, then the greatest religious revolutionary in Egyptian history died at half the age we thought, and the chronology of the Amarna period needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, because Tutankhamun is the most famous pharaoh in history. His tomb, his gold, his face, they are the image of Egypt. But Tutankhamun was a child king. He died at around 18 or 19 years old. He reversed his father's religious revolution, he restored the old gods, and he was almost certainly manipulated by older, more powerful men like Ai and Horemheb, who used the boy king and then quietly erased him too. Tutankhamun's own name was removed from the royal records within 2 generations of his death. He was only rediscovered because Howard Carter found his tomb intact in 1922. The boy who is famous because he was forgotten. Now consider this. The man in KV55 may have been Tutankhamun's older brother, a king who ruled briefly, a king whose name we may know or may not, a king who died young, was given a recycled coffin in a borrowed tomb, and then had his very existence scraped from the record. And if that's true, if the KV55 individual is not Akhenaten, but someone else entirely, then Akhenaten's body has never been found. The heretic pharaoh who rewrote the religion of the most powerful civilization on Earth is still missing. His remains, his face, his name, somewhere in the sand. Raise one final question and sit with it. In 2010, the DNA was extracted, the lineage was confirmed, the bones were scanned. And then the full genetic report, the one that would have told us the haplogroup, the migration markers, the ancestral patterns that would have resolved the identity debate, was never formally released. Why? Not similar to other cases of institutional delay, not inspired by bureaucratic caution. The same pattern that appears everywhere in the story of KV55. The evidence appears, the evidence is examined, and then the evidence goes quiet. The skeleton is still in Cairo. It sits behind glass in a basement room. The catalog card still reads, "Identity unknown." The coffin's empty face stares at nothing. The name is still missing. And somewhere beneath the golden plateau of the Valley of the Kings, in a corridor that may never be opened, the pharaoh who tried to change the world may still be lying in the dark, waiting for someone to say his name. If this kind of investigation is what you're here for, hit like and subscribe right now. It's the single best way to help this channel keep going deep. And if you want to follow this thread further, watch the next video. We go inside the Amarna royal bloodline and what modern genetics is revealing about the most inbred dynasty in the ancient world. It is stranger than anything in the history books. That video is on screen right now.